Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. 2 years after the abrogation of Article 370, the government of India is now actively considering banning both the factions of the Hurriyat, the hardline and the moderates. This is a group that does not believe in the Indian constitution. They believe in seceding away. They are pro-Pakistan, and now they are alleged to be involved in crores worth of corruption. The latest being the MBBS scam, in which medical college seats in government colleges in Jammu and Kashmir were being sold off and the money was being routed to Pakistan. Why should such a group that does not believe in anything that India stands for, does not believe in the sovereignty or the integrity of this nation, and most importantly now is being perceived as a corrupt, rotten to the core group, why should such an entity be given any form of legal cover here in India? That's going to be our debate topic here on Brass Tacks, but first, let's play out the story. All right, is it time to ban the Hurriyat? Here's the list of charges against the Hurriyat conference for which the government is actively considering a ban on this group. Number one, colluding with terror groups. The linkages between the Hurriyat and groups like the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Taiba are very well known. Raising funds. Remember, the NIA has multiple cases against Hurriyat leaders, including for terror funding. Promoting secessionist activities. Remember, I told you this is not a group that believes in the Indian constitution. This is a group that believes in breaking Kashmir away and possibly joining Pakistan. Number four, causing disruption in the Kashmir Valley. Remember, the Hurriyat is also faced with inciting the stone pelting that we saw through large parts of 2017 and 2018. And number five, taking part in anti-India conspiracy. These are the various charges that is up against the Hurriyat conference, various factions of it, not just the hardliners. And this is the reason why the government of India, 2 years after abrogation of Article 370, is now actively considering banning the Hurriyat conference. Let me now go across to our guest. Sushant Sareen, Senior Research Fellow of the Observer Research Foundation, is joining us. We also have Majid Haidari, Senior Journalist, on the broadcast tonight. Nalin Kohli, BJP spokesperson, joining us, and Najmul Saqib, PDP spokesperson, on the broadcast this evening. Sushant, I'll start with you. The case has been made out for a number of years as to why the Hurriyat conference, which doesn't believe in the Indian constitution, which actively promotes secessionist tendencies, should be banned. The question is, why hasn't it yet, and why now?
Zaka, why it hasn't been... I think the only answer I can give is that the government of India moves in mysterious ways. There was absolutely no rationale for an avowedly separatist organization, which was also an avowedly terrorist supporting organization, which was responsible for murder and mayhem, which not only backed terrorist organizations, but actually had its components had their own terrorist wings. Who were part of, doing this murder and mayhem, which disrupted life in Jammu and Kashmir, which issued hit lists of sorts of people whom it did not like, which actually forbade women from doing many things, like this fellow Sayyid Ali Gilani and others, and threatened and actually validated people throwing acid on women. I can't understand for the life of me why no government wanted to crack down on them. Far from it, every successive government until Mr. Modi's government was actually pandering to these guys, were also always trying to reach out to them. And even during the Modi government time, you saw people from the opposition going obsequiously to meet this fellow Sayyid Ali Gilani. So you've had this kind of, I don't know, call it, whatever you want to call it. So I'm very glad that the government is seriously considering this. And it should make out a proper case and do the needful.
Let me go across to Nalin Kohli and ask the legal rationale for this. You know, it's been 2 years since the abrogation of Article 370. There has been a process that's been kicked off when the Prime Minister and the Home Minister met with mainstream political parties. I think it was in the last week of June. When there is talk of some kind of, you know, as the Prime Minister said, Dilli or Dil ki duri, you have to try and bridge the duri of both Dil and Delhi. How productive would a ban on an organization like the Hurriyat at this stage be? And B, Nalin, how much of this is being driven by what is happening in Afghanistan and fears that some of these Talibs might be diverted to Kashmir next?
Zaka at the threshold, one will have to bear in mind that nothing has happened as of now. It's a media report.
Yes.
So therefore, it's in the realm of speculation. I mean, if it's in the realm of speculation, it is impossible to give you a legal rationale to something that hasn't happened. Because after all, that rationale would have to be based on, I mean, in a considered manner, one would have to look at what exactly has happened and what is the legal standing to what is the rationale taken on that. So therefore, I really can't answer that because it's purely speculative. But the second part of what you've just asked is interesting. And I think that is with regard to pandering. I think Indian citizens are clear that they do not see Pakistan as an arbiter or as any stake in anything that is within the territory of India, in Jammu and Kashmir, as it was the erstwhile state, and now Jammu and Kashmir as the Union territory and Ladakh as the Union territory are territories of India. They're territories of the Union after the accession process, which was way back in 1947-48. And Pakistan has no stake, cannot have any stake. In fact, there's a resolution of the Indian Parliament that specifically, unequivocally, and comprehensively across all political lines asks for the illegal occupation of those areas under Pakistan to be returned to India, even today. If you would remember, in the old assembly, there used to be seats being kept there because that is the territory of India under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. The second is, if within that, anybody, any person, and the Hurriyat as an organization or its constituents see Pakistan as involved in their so-called belief it's a tripartite process, that's completely against. There's no rationale to that either.
No,
and therefore, from that perspective, they really need to understand where they stand. That's for them. The third is with regard to terrorism and terror activity. The same media reports that you are basing this discussion on also clearly say that there have been reports of funds being used for terror activities coming in the name of so-called philanthropic or other work. Now that could possibly be one of the driving factors for any government or agency to consider what action should be taken and whether that action should involve even banning an organization under the UAPA.
Najmu Saqib, you know, here's the moot point as well. In addition to, you know, not believing in the Indian Constitution, in addition to, you know, actively propagating secession, the breaking away of Kashmir, perhaps integrating it with Pakistan, leave all of that aside. Now, evidence has come to light that the Hurriyat was actively involved in corrupt practices. Medical college seats were being sold. 6 people have been arrested for this. So not only is it a secessionist organization, it is also a corrupt organization. And you, as the representative of a mainstream political party, you should 100% welcome this because they are undermining everything that you stand for.
Well, I think first of all, I agree with what Nalinji just said, that this is in the realm of speculation. There's no formal order from the government which has banned the particular organization. But having said that, let me remind Nalinji that it was just a couple of years back they appointed a negotiator with the rank of Cabinet Secretary of India to initiate dialogue with Hurriyat in Jammu and Kashmir. So I think their short-term memory, that they are very famous for that. But it is ironic, to advocate banning of a particular organization. The members of the organization who themselves have been banned thrice. Remember, RSS was banned thrice, but it did not go away. Like, it did not wither away, right? And the fact of the matter is that these Hurriyat guys have been languishing in jails from 2018. Has anything happened? Has the situation stabilized in Kashmir? No, absolutely not. There is this constituency which works irrespective of these leaders, and so all we are saying is that banning is not a solution. They have an idea. We can have a better idea. Let's compete. Let's give space to these ideas, and these ideas can coexist. And a better idea can
Mr. Saqib, you represent a political party that believes in the idea of political participation through elections, right? You believe in political participation through elections. The Hurriyat does not believe in anything that you stand for. Why are you advocating for them?
No. And I think my argument is powerful, and we have been powerful. We have, gotten a lot of people from separatist camp right now who are contesting elections.
Exactly.
And it's not that we have not had success.
So
there are people,
all
lot
the
of people
more
who
reason,
are coming, but
all
banning
the
is
more
not an
reason
organization.
For you to be
antithetical
antithetical to an organization that stands for everything that you're against.
Zakar's simple point is that you banned Jamaat. Has Jamaat withered away? No, it's not. Like, you cannot ban. Tomorrow you'll come up with an order. You say people of Jammu and Kashmir are not allowed to breathe. People of Jammu and Kashmir are not allowed to have businesses. So you can't have, for God's sake, you're saying everything is normal in Kashmir. And then you go on this spree and saying that, look, everything is not wrong and Hurriyat is doing secession. Where have they been doing, man? They're in jails for 3 years.
No.
Which call have they given?
No. What do they stand for? Avowedly, as Sushant said, whether it is moderate faction or hardline faction, avowedly, they stand for everything against the Indian Constitution. They stand for seceding away from the Indian Union. And I want to ask Majid Hydari, now in the light of abrogation of Article 370, which was the binding factor, now what raison d'etre do these people have? Now what reason for existence does the Hurriyat have? Jammu and Kashmir is now as integral a part of India as any state in this country.
Well, see, Zaka, Hurriyat has been a dead horse for several years now. But BJP wants to take the credit of having killed a dead horse, and that has a reason. Because Hurriyat can be the dance prop for BJP's UP elections, because they need some kind of dance prop everywhere. This time it will be Hurriyat.
But banning Hurriyat is going to make people vote for them in Bulandshahr. I find that too much of a stretch.
Kashmir has been a bigger dance prop. Now Hurriyat will be a smaller dance prop. My point is very simple. Who made Hurriyat relevant for all these years? It was essentially the BJP government in 2004 which invited Hurriyat for talks. Now I don't understand BJP's blow hard, blow cold tactics on Kashmir. At one point in time, they say that Hurriyat is relevant and we need to negotiate with them. Now, the same BJP says that Hurriyat needs to be banned. I mean, there is a total confusion. BJP does not know how to carry forward on Kashmir. They have no policy at all other than looking at how it can benefit them in elections in other states. That is how they are working this time, that a dead horse is being declared to be killed by BJP.
But Mr. Hydari, don't you believe the abrogation of Article 370 changed the grounds of politics in Kashmir? And after what is the locus standi that people like Mirwais have?
Yes, I agree with you. A lot has changed in Kashmir since the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A. We don't have democratic rights and values in place in Kashmir. We don't have any elected government in place. We have record-breaking corruption, which never used to be for the last 70 years. We have a kind of a government which doesn't listen to its people. We have a bureaucratic kind of a mindset who are behaving like Viceroys. It's not me saying this. It's a former raw chief, C.D. Sahai, having written it in his research paper that bureaucrats in Jammu and Kashmir are behaving like Viceroys. So a lot has changed and we need to compliment BJP for all this. But the point is, how is any of these acts going to benefit the people of the country or the Indian nation? Nowhere. It is all being done for the election gimmicks.
Nalin Kohli, respond. No, forget about the election. I think it's too much of a stretch, saying that people will vote in Bulandshahr or in Lucknow just because something has happened in Kashmir. Leave that aside. But I think on the point of, who actually gave relevance to the Hurriyat. Mr. Vajpayee initiated the roundtable dialogue with the Hurriyat back in 2003-04. Forget about even that. As recently as a couple of years ago, Dinesh Sharma, who was the IB chief and then later got appointed as the interlocutor there, that was again under a BJP government. So how come they are suddenly now persona non grata just 2 years down the line? Nalin Kohli.
So it was my colleague from the other party respectfully pointed out and said that I had a short memory. But if he had paid more attention to the arguments that I had put forth in my opening comments, he would have noted that I specifically said that the red line, without using the word red line, was expecting Pakistan to be an arbitrator in what is Indian territory. And there's no place for that. And if I may remind that under Prime Minister Modi's government, when the Pakistani High Commissioner invited them a day before there was to be a round of talks between the two governments, invited the Hurriyat in Delhi, we moved away from those talks. Those talks never took place. As on another occasion, when the Foreign Minister of Pakistan was to visit India, and Sushma ji, as the then Foreign Minister of India, clearly said that if you're meeting with the Hurriyat, that is not welcome. So I think we need to live not in history but in the continuum of what Prime Minister Modi's government is. And within that, our idea has been clear. This is an idea of India for Indians and India of Indians. This is not an idea where the government, which will tolerate someone to believe that Pakistan has a stake within any inch of India. This is a government that when Pakistan crosses any line, it gives it back more than willingly, has given the army, everyone a free will. So you've seen, after Pulwama, there was the surgical strike, there's Balakot, all of it has happened. After Uri, there was the surgical strike, and after Pulwama, Balakot. So that's how it is. At the border, if there was firing from the other side, there is firing from our side. Because that's simple as this. Pakistan, as a neighboring country, has to take care of its own issues and look for friendly relations with India, but not on the terms that it has a stake in Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay.
Period. It doesn't. And we will not tolerate anyone who believes sitting in India that Pakistan does. They are welcome to cross the border and live there.
How does this play out in the context of what's happening in Afghanistan? There is a real fear, some would say, that after this whole Taliban regime gets established in Kabul and they take over the country, what do they do with these terrorists? They'll have to be diverted somewhere, and there is a genuine fear that this whole cabal of, China, Pakistan, Taliban, some of these fighters may get diverted to Kashmir, and therefore this is seen as a sort of a retro move, as it were, to try and deal with that, or to try and prevent that in some form or fashion. Sushant.
Yeah, Zakka, look, I think there are very serious concerns on what is going to happen, what's happening in Afghanistan filtering into India. And in fact, Mr. Saqib's party leader has also threatened India with something similar. Only her problem is that she doesn't think beyond making a ridiculous statement, because she should then see what happens in Afghanistan after that. Unless just that people of Jammu and Kashmir, I don't think anybody should take her with any degree of seriousness. But aside of that, I think it is important to, because of these concerns, to not just, address the security dimension of whatever flow of terrorism might come in, but also address the ecosystem which actually gives, some degree of legitimacy or some degree of support to these kind of people. We are talking about, for example, how the Pakistanis would farm out seats in medical colleges, which could then be sold to Kashmiri kids, so that, the Hurriyat fellows could enrich themselves. We know of how smuggling rackets were being run from across the border, in which Hurriyat fellows were actually making money. Now, this was part of the ecosystem which was also promoted from within India by giving, children of these Hurriyat leaders fancy positions, not asking them the source of their funds. We had ourselves also created this ecosystem. I think planning or going after the Hurriyat and other such characters is part of dismantling that ecosystem, which equips the Indian state to fight terrorism.
Okay, Mr. Hydari, respond. Is it not a fact that kids of Kashmir were duped by these fellows with the promise of MBBS seats? And that money was coming back to them, and they were using that money to foment stone pelting and other, anti-national activity in the valley. Isn't that true?
Zakka, before replying your question, I have a very humble submission. How come have Taliban 2.0 become terrorists? They are millennial Talibans, moderate Talibans. America has accepted their being the peaceniks for Afghanistan now. So who are we to decide that they are terrorists? I mean, if India wants to give a diplomatic defeat to Pakistan, we must have good relations with Taliban. Now, coming to this point, yes, it's an open secret that Hurriyat leaders would sell the MBBS seats. But I have a simple question for Nalin Kohli ji. Will you order a probe into who were the beneficiaries of those seats? No, they'll never do that. Because as I said, it's all about a dance prop for the UP elections.
But who were the beneficiaries? Were the Hurriyat. The money came back to the Hurriyat. Who else?
No, who were the beneficiaries of the seats?
At the expense of poor Kashmiri kids.
Children of slain militants.
No, at the expense of poor Kashmiri kids, Hurriyat leaders fattened their purse strings. That's what happened.
No, for me, a poor Kashmiri kid also means the kid of a slain militant. Did any slain militant's kid get a seat? No, nobody did. Only the money people in the VIPs got that. And that is why the BJP doesn't talk about that.
No, sir. As far as I'm concerned, it's a very, very simple equation. 370, and you agree on this as well as I wrap up, 370 changed the very ground for politics in Kashmir. After that is gone, for anybody to have any sympathies or even think that what the Hurriyat stands for is actually a realistic possibility here in India and a realistic future for Kashmir, it's absolutely a daydream. So let's leave that aside. Let's see if at all this ban or the threat to ban or the potential ban fructifies. There is, as Nalin Kohli has said, every case to do that with the Hurriyat, but let's see if it actually comes to bear. That's a wrap. I want to thank all our guests, but I want to focus now on the situation in Afghanistan because the evacuation there is going on. Even this morning, more than 150, both Afghan as well as Indian nationals were brought back. The Taliban continues to go on a rampage. The government has called for an all-party meeting Thursday to discuss the crisis in Afghanistan. In fact, the Prime Minister had asked External Affairs Minister Jaishankar to brief all floor leaders of Parliament on what's happening in Afghanistan and what India and how India intends to deal with this situation. As of now, 600 stranded Indians have been brought back home. India has also assured help to Hindus and Sikhs who are fleeing the war-torn country. Meanwhile, one of the persons who fled Afghanistan is the Member of Parliament, Anarkali Kaur, who spoke to CNN News 18's Shivani Gupta. She managed to escape from Kabul and has been brought to India in the most tragic of circumstances.
पहले आप जैसे जो अफगान एमपीज हैं जो भारत के लिए आना चाह रहे थे उनको तालिबान आने नहीं दे रहा था एयरपोर्ट पे आपने काफी देर वेट किया आपको वापस भी एक गुरुद्वारे में भेज दिया गया बट फिर मेहनत करके इंडियन गवर्नमेंट आपको यहाँ लेके आई है क्या आप हमें बता सकते हैं वो 2 दिन आपके लिए कैसे रहे
शुक्रिया धन्यवाद आपके फोर्स हम इंडियन गवर्नमेंट प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी जी Ministry of External Affairs and Indian Air Force और ख़ासतन पुनीत सिंह चंदोक के बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करती हूँ और 2 दिन के हम कांटेक्ट में थे कि कैसी ही रास्ता निकले जाएगा जो हम अभी हालात ऐसे ही हैं हम बहुत मजबूर हो गए कि अफ़गानिस्तान को छोड़कर कोई दूसरे कंट्री में कोई टाइम वहाँ पे रहे हम ये उम्मीद है कि हालात ठीक हो जाए लेकिन कोई गारंटी नहीं है
तो
फिर हमने
बहुत हालात बहुत खराब हो गए थे क्योंकि तालिबान तो पूरे दुनिया को ये बताना चाह रही है कि उनसे किसी को खतरा नहीं है और अगर कोई भारतीय हो सिख हो हिंदू हो उनको खतरा नहीं है आप तो एमपी हैं अफगानिस्तान में तो आपके लिए हालात इतने खराब क्यों थे
मेरे लिए नहीं लेकिन सब लोगों के लिए यानी ये मैं नहीं कहती हूँ कि यानी मैं सेफ नहीं थे अभी सब दुनिया ये देख रही है अफ़गानिस्तान के एक ट्रेजेडी हालात है आप देख रहे हैं कि अफ़गानिस्तान में सब लोग अपने घर से बाहर निकलकर एयरपोर्ट में कितना रश है हर रोज़ वहाँ एयरपोर्ट के आसपास अंदर 3 बंदे तो बिल्कुल एक नॉर्मली है कि लोगों की डेट होता है वहाँ पे ऐसी ही रश है फायर है कि हम یہ کبھی بھی کون بھی نہیں سوچتے تھے کہ افغانستان کے ایئرپورٹ ایسا ہوگا. افغانستان یعنی ہم 20 دن 1 مہینہ پہلے یہ نہیں سوچتے تھے کہ افغانستان کے حالات ایسے ہوگا کہ خوف اتنا زیادہ ہوگا کہ سب اپنے گھر کو چھوڑ کر نکل کر ہر جگہ پہ جائے ہمارے لیے سیف ہے. یہ سوچتے ہیں لوگ.
In fact, you heard that Member of Parliament talking about the situation at the Kabul airport, where on the ground, huge crowds continue to wait for a way out. CNN's Sam Kiley has his report. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time.
We've landed just a few moments ago here at Kabul International Airport, and clearly the pace of evacuation has been picking up. There are planes leaving pretty regularly now, and large numbers of refugees, of evacuees, getting ready to get on those flights. This is a group that are heading into Qatar, where they're hoping then to either stay there or move on. Guillaume, you're about to leave. What is going through your mind and your heart at the moment?
Yeah, actually, I've told this many times with others that right now I have a mixed feeling. Being a journalist myself, probably I'm lucky enough to leave because of a lot of threats that exist here. But I'm also leaving a family, a whole family behind, and that's a lot of friends behind. And also most importantly, my city, Kabul, that I've been raised and born here, that's really, it seems that I'm just picking one piece of my soul, but leaving a lot of pieces just back in home. So it's strange. I don't know how to describe this. Am I happy? Am I sad? With this government, with these new rulers, I'm sure they will not leave us any space to be here.
That must break your heart.
Of course, certainly. That has already broken, but that's the reality.
Your heart's already broken.
Yes. Yeah.
Good luck. It's not just the personal tragedies that are so heartbreaking here. It is the tragedy of Afghanistan itself. For 20 years, so many millions of people believed that they would receive Western support. They believed in the evolution of female education, of the arts, of cinema. They thought they had a future. Now that future is getting on aircraft and leaving. As one of the evacuees just said to me, Afghanistan is seeing a total brain drain.